What's up, Vankers?
Hello, Vankers!
How's everybody doing?
How are you doing? Are you okay? The season's over. I'm so sad. I'm so sad the season's over. What am I going to do with my time?
What are we going to talk about? What are we going to talk about?
What are we going to talk about?
About?
No, dude. Listen, he might be from Canada, but he's still North American, okay? And that's what I got to say. We have the man, the myth, the IndyCar legend, your new favorite commentator on F1 TV, and a second place runner-up finisher on Dancing with the Stars. We have the one, the only James Hinchcliffe on the pod.
Yes. Hello, guys. Thank you for the intro. And I'm just curious, what does Gunter charge you for use of like his catchphrase on the intro there?
You know,
he doesn't really busy himself with the details. He has other people bother us about that. He's a big picture guy.
Yeah, that's fair.
Guy.
Yeah.
At some point we will be in court with him.
We'll receive an invoice.
We'll receive
an invoice, and
we'll be on opposite ends of the thing, and we'll have to pay him out for the rest of our lives.
I think it's one of my dreams to be in binding arbitration with Gunther Steiner. I think that'll.
Hey, look, man. I think he's currently in some of that, isn't he?
Yeah, I know. That's how you know.
Whatever.
Yeah, that's how you know you made it. Is right. I want to be in a social network situation with Gunther.
You're nobody until you've been sued. That's just like a fact.
Exactly.
That's right.
Yeah.
What about a cease and desist? Are you somebody then?
Yeah, I think that counts. I think that counts.
Awesome.
If you get subpoenaed for anything, cease and desists. There's a nice breadth. There's a nice range of different legal issues that once you hit, you're doing something right.
By the way, I tease you. I did the about and out. I have actor friends who are from Canada, and he was like showing me their worksheet and like they're practicing saying out, about.
Yeah.
Did you have to work on any of that for your broadcasting?
No, I mean I'm Canadian. I'm not playing a part, right? I'm just being me. So I can say out, about, house, couch, and it's fine. But it's funny, my wife's an actress and she has to like work on that and actively like get rid of those things. And I always like I always call her out, ironically, when I hear her, talking in everyday life, and she'll say ow, and I'm like, who the hell do you think you are?
Right.
Ew. Ew. Who is this person? Yeah. Traitor.
Right.
Just terrible.
Well, dude, you're a traitor, dude.
Yeah.
You're there in Indianapolis. You're an IndyCar guy, and then all of a sudden you're palling around. You're in Monaco. You're in Abu Dhabi. You're bumping elbows with all these F1 guys.
Joseph Newgarden better not cast you outside, bro.
Well, I'm curious, kind of like, where F1 was on your radar within your career, or when you got more, seriously into it, this transition. How has it been for you? What's it like being like an IndyCar guy, a North American guy in this very European world of Formula One? How's that been for you?
Yeah, great question. So, I mean, F1 was something I've always been a fan since I was a kid. I grew up in Toronto, but my dad was from England and huge racing fan, huge F1 fan. And I literally, as far back as I can remember, it was watching races with dad. And so it would be Sunday mornings F1, Sunday afternoons IndyCar. And, at that time, IndyCar, and still does, races in Toronto. So like in every July, we'd get to go see the IndyCars race in person, and it was amazing. And I went to the Montreal Grand Prix, I think, for the first time when I was like 8 or something. So because of dad, I've followed all racing. And then when I got into it and started kind of trying to make a career in it, if you're based here, IndyCar kind of makes more sense.
Mm-hmm.
You really have to be based in Europe and kind of grow up racing in Europe if you really want to take a stab at F1. I had one opportunity when I was like 18. I had raced a series here that BMW kind of sponsored, and I drove kind of for BMW. And they had a sister series that ran over in Europe, and they offered me a ride over there, but I would have had to move over there and whatever. And at that time, making a career in it was still so far-fetched, and my parents were like, look, I don't know if dropping out of school at this age and moving over there is really on the cards. So we didn't. We stayed in North America and focused on the IndyCar route, which, again, I always had a massive passion for because I got to go see it in person every year in my backyard. And so that was kind of it. Like, I never really thought about it again in terms of my career as a driver. And I just stayed a fan forever, man. I mean, if it's a motorsport, I'm probably into it in some way or another. And so I've been a fan of F1 all along. And when I retired from IndyCar at the end of 21 and moved up into the booth with NBC calling IndyCar races, I got a call from someone at F1 TV saying, "Hey, man, we need somebody with a North American sound to do a couple of these races. Would you be interested?" Yeah. And so started with 3 races in year 1, and then it was 6 races last year. It was 8 races this year, and we'll see.
Did they say North American sound, or did they just not know the difference over there?
No, they were kind enough to do the research and know that what they really wanted to say was American sound, but they didn't want to offend me, so they said North American sound, because they definitely weren't looking for a Canadian sound. That's for sure. Like, that's not a thing that people are like really, in the market for, as it were.
Well, I think when you're used to listening to all the Brits and anything that's, Canadian, it's all a wash.
You sound John Wayne next to Will Buxton.
Right, yeah.
You sound like John Wayne next to Will Buxton.
100%. 100%.
I'm curious about, growing up, following all these different series. Who were your guys? Who were your heroes? Who did you look up to? Who were they for you?
So, I mean, I was all about the Canadians, so it started with Jacques Villeneuve, really, because he was in IndyCar before he went to F1. And so that was my guy in IndyCar. And that was kind of about the age that I was really old enough to understand racing and was thinking about getting to go-karting and all this stuff. So I followed Jacques' career in IndyCar pretty closely. And then when he went to F1, that's really when I started paying super close attention to F1.
Right.
And then the guy that took his seat in IndyCar, it was a Canadian guy called Greg Moore. So Greg was my guy. That was kind of always my number one hero, dude. He was just awesome. And he was tragically killed in an accident in 99. But so I followed him. I followed Jack religiously, and kind of just I stuck with the Canadians until we really didn't have any. To be honest.
Damn. So people talk a lot about British bias, but
yeah.
What people don't really talk about in the booth now is that there's big Canadian bias.
Hey, look, man,
are you holding back on Stroll?
Yeah,
I was just feel yourself holding. Where you at with the Lance,
dude?
I call it how I see it, man. Good, bad, or indifferent. Good, bad, or indifferent. I call it how I see it.
Okay. When he backed into the gravel, how did you call that one?
I called it how I saw it.
Oh, okay.
It didn't look good.
Okay.
It didn't look good.
Okay.
That was a tough one.
Okay.
It was a tough look. Look.
Okay. So you grew up in Canada. You decided to do the karting thing in North America. How do you think? You've probably talked to guys who've gone overseas. Like I think Connor went overseas. Mm-hmm. Joseph went overseas.
Colton.
Right.
Rossi.
How do you think? Because people say like, Europe hits different. How do you think the junior formula in Europe compares to the junior formula in North America? Because I actually was reading about Lance recently, and he won like everything in Canada as a karter, and then he went over to Europe, and it was like just objectively hard. Like, where do you think it is Canada versus US versus Europe?
So the easiest way to look at it, I think, is you look at the popularity of top level road racing in your respective region, right? So if you're over in Europe and you're talking about being a professional racing driver, sorry for my dogs hanging out in the background. In Europe, I mean, F1's it, right? I mean, right. There's sports cars, and that's a career that a lot of drivers have made a good living doing, but like everybody starts aiming for F1. And in North America, the biggest motorsport is NASCAR, really. IndyCar is at a time, I would say it was level, and it was even kind of almost globally level with F1. We saw guys like Nigel Mansell coming over in the 90s. We saw Michael Andretti going that way. Like there was a little bit more kind of cross-pollination. But NASCAR has always kind of domestically been the biggest, right? And so if you look at the number of people that want to get to that end game, that then trickle down, right, and multiply it by whatever exponential factor every level down all the way to go-karting, and that's your grid. So in Canada, we're a population of 35 million people, right? So not that many people in the grand scheme of things. Like a tenth of the US, right? And most people in Canada aren't into racing. They're into hockey. You want to talk about how many kids are playing hockey? Yeah, it's a shit ton. right? So it's just a little bit different. So when you go over to Europe, right, from karting, all the junior categories, everything, you have just an entire continent that's trying to do one thing, which is go to F1. So is the competition a little stiffer? Yeah, because there's more of them. I think the best at each are great. I think the difference is the mid-level over in Europe is probably better. And so if you're driving in that mid-level, you're learning more, you're experiencing more, you're picking up things that you might not if you're mid-level in North America.
Right. The floor is higher.
Correct.
So when you went over to from IndyCar to F1 in terms of commentary, obviously you're a fan, you're very knowledgeable. Like, what was the learning, but you never actually did it. Like what was the learning curve for you? Like, obviously David Coulthard, Brundle, even though it was years ago, had that advantage of driving those tracks, even if it was older.
Palmer.
Palmer had that firsthand experience, and you didn't. You had a very close a very close experience at IndyCar, but did you find yourself, like, what was the learning curve for you in that regard?
Yeah, I mean, I immediately walked in with imposter syndrome, right, for that very reason. And I know that the F1 fan base is global and very intense.
Right.
And they're going to sniff out, BS right away. So I was incredibly lucky, very fortunate that my very first race working for F1 TV was Austin 22. And in Austin 22, McLaren ran a little-known driver by the name of Alex Palou in their FP1, who I've raced against. Now he's a 3-time IndyCar champion. I knew him very well. So I told him ahead of time. I was like, look, bro, I'm walking into this world. I know, luckily I was well-versed as you could be from the outside, right? Like, I read every article on every website. Like, I'm just into the sport, right? And, but I told him, I was like, the one thing I don't know is the details of the car. And so I said, when you get out of that car after FP1, you're coming, you finish your debrief and you're coming straight to me. And I just peppered him with questions and just like absolutely hounded him and tried to learn as much as I could. And what I realized was when you're calling motorsports, right, it's almost irrelevant, as long as it's closed circuit racing and we're not talking drag racing or rally racing or something, 95% of it's the same. IndyCar, F1, sports cars, stock cars. It's 95% of the what you need to be able to tell an audience as a driver analyst is the same. The 5% is the nuance of the cars, the tracks, things like that. And even that, I mean, I realized I was peppering Alex with questions that I'm like, this is never going to come up on a broadcast. Like, nobody needs to know like what strat mode you're in on an outlet. Like that's way too inside baseball. So he got me comfortable with the broad strokes of what it's like in the car. And then again, I mean, I had Julian Palmer, we have David Coulthard. So my job's less about talking about what it's like driving an F1 car, but it's what's it like for a driver in this race scenario or in this scenario or in this situation. Like, I can talk about that because it's very, very similar to what I've done.
Where do you feel like you're at now with that same? Do you still feel like there's still tinges of the imposter syndrome? Are you feeling more comfortable a few years in?
Definitely more comfortable. And I think a lot of that comes from just getting to know more people in the paddock as well, right? Like, when I stepped out of the car and into the booth at IndyCar, I could still walk into any trailer because I know everybody. I'd been doing it for 11 years. That was my world, right? F1, first of all, it's much bigger. There's just a lot more people. And I knew like 4 people. I knew like one person at Red Bull, one person at Haas, one person at Alpine, and Will Buxton. And so it was like, I had to start with 4. And that was my foundation. But then you hang out enough, and Will was so awesome. I mean, he took me under his wing, took me in and out of places, introduced me to people. And so, yeah, now having done, 15-ish races over the last 3 years, you become more comfortable in the environment. You can ask more questions. So you can feel a little bit more prepared.
Venkas, as you know, we have teamed up with BetMGM this season, and we are using BetMGM lines to make all of our picks. And if you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, use bonus code DADDY, and you will get up to $1,500 first bet offer on your first wager with BetMGM. Here is how it works. You download the BetMGM app, and you sign up using the bonus code DADDY. Because we're fun, deposit at least $10 and place your first wager on any game. You'll receive up to $1,500 in bonus bets if your bet loses. Just make sure that you use the bonus code DADDY when you sign up. Don't forget, if you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, use bonus code DADDY and get your first $1,500 first bet offer today. See BetMGM.com for terms. 21 and over. U.S. promotional offers not available in New York, Nevada, Ontario, or Puerto Rico. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Available in the U.S. Call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY for New York. Call 1-800-NEXT-STEP for Arizona. 1-800-327-5050 for Massachusetts. 1-800-BETS-OFF for Indiana. 1-800-981-0023 for Puerto Rico. First bet offer for new customers only. Subject to eligibility requirements. Rewards are non-withdrawable bonus bets that expire in 7 days. In partnership with Kansas Crossing Casino and Hotel. Don't forget, if you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, use bonus code DADDY and get your $1,500 first bet offer today.
What's something, now that you've commentated and like you've done the sort of broadcasting for both sides, what's something that you think IndyCar could learn from F1 to make IndyCar sort of more entertaining, better, however you take that question? And what's something F1 could learn from IndyCar now that you've sort of done both?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I think from if we're just talking about the on-track product, right? IndyCar's on-track product is great. I mean, if you're a new F1 fan and you've never watched an IndyCar race, but you really enjoy the on-track wheel-to-wheel action, strategy battles, all that stuff, IndyCar's got a lot going for it. Where IndyCar loses out to F1, I think is how they market the series, how they promote the drivers. From an on-track standpoint, I don't think there's honestly much that IndyCar could benefit from F1. You look the other way from the on-track side, understanding that because the cars are different, right? In IndyCar, everybody's basically driving the same car. Right. So ignoring the inherent differences that are going to come from the fact that everyone's driving a different car, I think tire warmers are a big detractor of actual racing.
Why? Why?
Because when a car leaves the pits after a stop in F1, that's as fast as it's going to go that stint, right? The tires are up to temp and the tires are fresh. And as long as you come out physically in front of a guy, you're pretty much staying in front of him. And it's kind of boring. Like in an IndyCar race, you got to really plan out your stops because, dude,
every time
outlaps are like, gnarly, man.
Tires are ice cold.
It is hard. It is super fucking hard. And so that's also kind of what separates some of the great drivers from the good ones, because the ones who can really master that, it's such a key part of the race. And for us, it can kind of, depending on the track, it really throws it more undercut, overcut, which one's more powerful and more. Most F1 races, the undercut wins, right? So I would ban tire warmers tomorrow if I could.
Hell yeah.
Refueling, I know that's never coming back in F1, so it's kind of a moot point, but that just it blows strategies way open. It makes it way more interesting from a strategy standpoint.
Can I push back on refueling really quick, and maybe you can help me on this? The thing I don't like, so obviously tire saving is a dark art that like us mere mortals can't understand like how it works. Like we can't really see it. And refuel and fuel saving is obviously a dark art that we can't really see, and it's hard to articulate it to us. And when I watch IndyCar, I find myself like not understanding what's happening. Like it's just like I'm watching a race and I'm sitting there and I'm watching it, and then all of a sudden Scott Dixon wins, and I'm like, what the fuck happened? Like it's so, you know what I mean?
That's what everybody else says too.
It's like it is always Dixon when those races happen.
And I'm like, but I'm like, I don't understand it. I'm sitting there and I'm just watching it, and I'm like, wow.
Yeah.
You don't, at least F1, like it's more predictable in a bad way, but at least I can like understand it more.
That's interesting. It's interesting because that makes me realize that Townsend and I are not doing our job on the IndyCar broadcast and not being able to explain what's happening.
Well, it's like there was that one race, I forgot where it was, where like Dixon just went off, and I'm like, well, in an F1 race, like that guy's fucked. That makes sense, right? He's spun around, he's off, and he's just like hanging out in the mid pack, and then he wins because he's just like lifting little bits occasionally, and like there's something to do with refueling. And then there's like the what's the NOS button? I forgot what it's called. The
push to pass.
Push to pass. Yeah. There's also like there's all these like little factors that you've not really. That's why I'm worried about the new
not
thing,
DRS,
the not DRS, because that's something that's another thing you can't really see. At least DRS is like, oh, he's got the flap open, he's within it. It's simple, it's idiot proof. So I'm like so like walk me through like why fueling, because like I don't understand refueling because it's too many variables for me, idiot.
Right.
And that's why Dixon winning is always a surprise.
Right. Right. So yes, Scott Dixon has some insane ability to save fuel that no one else in the history of the sport's been able to kind of master to the same degree. But what's cool about it is, so where in F1, a lot of the only kind of strategy you have is your tire strategy, right? Is it a 1 or 2 stop? Do you start on the hards and mediums, the softs, whatever? And every team has all this simulation, and every team will tell you that on paper, the best strategy is X. And so 90% of them will do the exact same strategy.
Except for George Russell, who say, what if we did?
Yeah, except for like Spa or like
Sainz or Russell.
Or like where they do but they're wrong sometimes, right? And they'll do a 1 stop and then it's like Leclerc did in where did he do it? Monza.
In Monza. Yeah.
Right.
So yes, so once in a while you get those curveballs, and that's exciting, right?
Right.
Like those races were cool. With like, hey, are George's tires going to last? Can Charles hold off Piastri? Like those were really cool. Right. If everybody did the same thing, it'd be boring.
Right.
In F1, more times than not, the top 10 are all doing the same thing.
Okay.
You'll see some guys rolling the dice in the back, like Hamilton did in Abu Dhabi, right? He started on the hards because everyone else was starting on the mediums, and from 16th, you got to do something different. If you do the same as the guys in front, you're not going to go anywhere.
Right.
So what the refueling does is it throws that element into pretty much every race. So in IndyCar, you're often like, is it a 2-stop or a 3-stop because of fuel more than tires 95% of the time? And you know that some drivers are going to try to stretch it out and do a 2-stop, and that's going to require driving slower and saving fuel. And the guys that are doing the 3-stop, they have to make up that entire extra pit stop. Same as in F1, but you can just do it through saving fuel rather than saving tires, which is really what those guys are doing.
Right.
But I guess maybe I'm wrong, but like I wish maybe in IndyCar I could see how much, like almost like a gas tank, I could see how much fuel they had.
Yeah.
For like, because in tires they tell you the tire age and you know what type of tire it is, and they'll tell you like how long these tires usually last. So at least as a dumbass, I could be like, okay, so like I can kind of see where this is going. Whereas refueling, you kind of have no fucking idea.
Yeah, who's on what
level of fuel and like what's going on. It's kind of too opaque for me. Idiot. Dumbass.
This is what we have to do better, because here's what's funny is those tire graphics, they're completely made up. Like they're the data on that.
I find them comforting though.
I'm sure they're like a nice warm blanket on a chilly fall morning, but they are completely like someone just punched numbers into a graphic machine. They're nothing.
Fine.
Oh, really? Like they're like these tires are 3 laps old when they get on.
No, that's right. But like they show like a percentage. Like he's got 20% left on his front tires. Like you don't fucking know how much tires left. Like shut up.
Okay.
If you knew that, then Leclerc wouldn't have been able to win in Monza. Right? That's just not how it works.
Yeah.
So those are approximations. Those are guesses. We can have actually a much more accurate guess. That's all still going to be a bit of a guess on how much fuel is in the tank. And so like in IndyCar, we'll put up a little graphic that says like here's their pit stop window based on the last time they stopped. So if you're going flat out, it's going to be on the early side. If you've been saving fuel, it's going to be on the later side. I think graphically, IndyCar can do a better job of that stuff. And we can make graphics that make you feel all warm and fuzzy inside, but tell the story.
Yes. Right. And I need the EF like a dumbass, and I want the yellow light. That's what I need.
Like my phone battery. Green, yellow, red.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's what you need.
All right.
For me to understand what's happening in IndyCar.
I'm going to pass that along to the
Do you have
big
Penske's
dogs.
number?
I do, yeah.
Can we get him on the phone right now?
I'll shoot him a text. He's a big texter. Texter. I'll still shoot him a text and have him sort of. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, you're always sending each other memes.
Yeah. Hey, Raj. Raj.
Exactly. So, yeah, I mean, that's that. So now we're talking about IndyCar. Now, while we're on IndyCar F1, before we go fully F1, a lot of talk about Cadillac and who they're going to bring on. I guess I want to ask, like, if you had to pick some Americans or North Americans, because we have to include the other countries to be polite. So that would maybe include Mexico, and Canada, if we must. Who would you bring on if you were head of Cadillac? And also, like, who do you, based on driving styles, because you've now sort of an expert in both, based on driving styles, who do you think is in IndyCar that would just in general would do great in F1? And who is in F1 that would do great in IndyCar? Like, are there guys who are like not great in, or like mid in F1 that would be great in IndyCar, and guys who are mid in IndyCar that would be great in F1? Are there sort of like interesting sort of switches that you think?
For sure. For sure. And that's what's so interesting about motorsports is there is no like universal talent to driving. There are drivers that are super, super talented in a specific car. And then you switch them to a different car, even if it's a similar car, and they just can't quite hit it the same way. You even see that in F1 within different teams because of the different characteristics of a car, right? Like nobody can drive Max's car.
Right.
Because of how he likes to go fast, or at least how Newey likes to build a car, and Max can figure out how to drive it fast where others can't. But Ferrari this year was a great example. Whenever they were battling chronic understeer, Sainz was always ahead of Leclerc. Yeah. If the car was a bit on the nose and a bit free in the back, Leclerc was always faster than Sainz. They just have a different way of finding lap time. So when you talk about drivers switching from F1 to IndyCar or vice versa, it's so hard to try to kind of isolate who could be competitive in each, because their specific abilities in IndyCar might work well in a Mercedes, but might not work well in a Red Bull, or, you know what I mean? So if you're looking at the drivers that I think could hop over and immediately be competitive in general from IndyCar to F1, obviously Palou, I mean, he's a 3-time champion. The way he drives, the way he manages races, I think is exceptional. And I think he could be quick in anything, which is interesting because he had a very average junior career over in Europe.
Right.
Not a lot of people had eyes on him. He wasn't a phenom like Max Verstappen, like Kimi Antonelli. He was kind of a middle of the road guy.
Yeah.
But Lawson said Super Formula was the best indicator of F1 success, which I find interesting. Yeah.
And Alex was good in Super Formula.
Yeah.
So, that's been a great proving ground for a lot of drivers in open wheel, and going to F1. Colton Herta, he's tested with McLaren. They were very impressed with him. Pato O'Ward's obviously done a bunch of driving now with McLaren. They've been very impressed with him. And then I would love to see what Newgarden could do in a car, because that guy is, again, he operates at a very high level. And one of the things we talk about Verstappen a lot is just the reserve capacity he has when he's driving a Formula One car, like the mental capacity that he has in reserve on hand when he is 10/10ths flat out leading a race, managing tires, managing everything. Like the mental strain of doing that it's really tough to explain to people that have never done it. It is super, super difficult. And to have the capacity to, like, while doing that, be like, hey, I don't think Lando backed off all the way in that yellow flag. Do you mind looking into that real quick?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Are you kidding me? So, like, Joseph's kind of, again, Palou's kind of the same way, and I think Joseph's kind of similar. And he's an aggressive guy. I think he would potentially do really well in, like, the racecraft side of F1, and I think they'd be good. Going the other way, yeah. I mean, Max is actually good in anything. I take that statement I said earlier about you can't be good at, like, it's not. Yeah, Max is actually just good in everything, I think.
But is there someone like with a skill like Dixon? Like he wouldn't be able to use his fuel saving in F1.
Correct.
Right.
Like, do you think he'd struggle besides the fact that people would say he's too old or whatever? Like, but Dixon 5 years ago or whatever.
Yeah, but Dixon in his prime, I think he would be very competitive. I don't know if he'd be as competitive as he is in IndyCar, because two of his biggest strengths are his fuel saving abilities and his oval abilities, which obviously are irrelevant on the F1 circuit.
Right.
But but doesn't that cut against Newgarden? Because Newgarden's better at ovals.
I think Penske's better at ovals right now. I don't know if I'd necessarily. I think Newgarden's exceptional on ovals, and probably the best guy on ovals, regardless of the car he's in. But I do think the Penske's are outclassing the rest of the field on ovals at the moment. So it's a vicious combo. It's kind of like what Dixon did back in the heyday with Ganassi.
Were you surprised when Ericsson kind of came from F1 and then, won the 500? It feels like that's a thing that I think a lot of European guys are afraid of when it comes to IndyCar. They're like, well, the ovals, I mean, I've never done that. They didn't grow up doing that. And then for him to come into IndyCar and to be able to win the 500, that I was pretty shocked by that.
And then back it up the next year,
almost winning, yeah,
and almost winning
in
maybe
arguably
Abu Dhabi
should have 2021 kind of situation.
Exactly.
We were in that.
Exactly
we were in that press. We were there for that. We were in that press conference, and he was.
He was pissed. He was
and rightly so.
Yeah.
Rightly so. I mean, look, both guys drove well enough to win that race that day. The way it played out, just again, you're exactly right. It's 80-21 on IndyCar scale.
Yeah.
But no, was I surprised? I mean, yes and no. I was his teammate his rookie year in IndyCar. And you're right. So many Europeans have this fear of ovals, which I'll be honest, I had as well when I first started, because I didn't grow up actually really loving them. My hero, Greg, died on an oval. I kind of had this thing against them until I did them. And once you do them, you realize how much fun they can be. And drivers kind of go one of two ways, man. They'll come over and sometimes they'll tolerate them, but really not enjoy them. And they are rarely successful on an oval. But if your first test, you come out of it with like eyes all wide, you're like, fuck me, that was awesome. Like 230 miles an hour. That was flat out. That was awesome. I'm like, this guy's going to go places. Like you got it. And Marcus had that.
How screwed is IndyCar going to be if Logan Sargent gets a ride and just dominates?
Well, look, man, I mean, like Marcus came out of a Sauber that had never finished in the top 8 and started winning races and 500s and stuff. Like the car makes such a difference in F1. Right. And again, Logan has a very good skill set. That's how he got there in the first place. Maybe that particular type of car does not suit his style. So if he gets into an IndyCar and all of a sudden is like a top 5 guy, I don't think that's an indictment of the IndyCar field or of IndyCars as a race car. It's just different, right? I mean, Jimmy Johnson won 7 cup championships, got into an IndyCar, and it was like, yeah, it was tough. It was a big struggle. Dario Franchitti won, 4 championships and 3 500s, goes over to NASCAR and wasn't very good. Like they're just different skill sets between the different series.
Where do you stand on this whole debate online that people are loving, the Kyle Larson, Max Verstappen debate? I mean,
I know Kyle. I have an incredible amount of respect for Kyle as a racing driver. There's just no chance. So here's the thing. This is how I try to settle this argument, right? Yeah. If you want to see who's the best, you take let's say the top 5 series in the world. So let's say it's F1 or IndyCar, like a high downforce open wheel car, right? Yeah. A stock car. We'll say a sports car, a prototype sports car, a GT style sports car, and then what, like a rally car?
Yeah.
Okay. Across those 5 disciplines, Max will win in 4. And it's not Kyle's fault. If you made those 5 cars, a cup car, a Craftsman truck, a 410 sprint car, a midget and a late modified, Kyle would win 5 out of 5. Right. But if we're looking at all the top levels of motorsport across the globe, there's just his skill set is so unique to what he does. And he does it better than 99.9% of even professionals. But to try to compare to what Max does or what he would be capable of in those particular cars, like it's not even a conversation.
I love it. I'd like to hear that. Okay, wait. I want to get to, you were talking about the ovals and how, you were intimidated by them coming in. Then you had, the biggest crash of your career, a life-threatening crash in the lead up to the 500. And then the next year you got pole.
Yeah.
Like where, it's like for someone who was intimidated by them going into it, clearly you kind of got charged up by it, but then you have this like intense life-threatening crash. Like that didn't sway you. That didn't like kind of confirm a fear. There wasn't like, James Hinchcliffe from when your rookie year of IndyCar being like, what the fuck are you doing, dude? Like stay away from this thing.
How do you have a goldfish brain about something like that?
Yeah.
Well, I was just going to say, you guys have interviewed a lot of drivers. How many would you say are super smart?
I think they're smart.
No, honestly, you do need like a pretty high degree of intelligence.
As my sister would say, they're smart in their own way.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly right. Yes. And self-preservation is not one of them.
Right.
You would never get in this sport if you were worried about crashing or getting hurt or dying in a race car, right? It's as soon as you reach that point in your thinking, that's when you stop driving. And, I had that crash. I woke up in hospital. I had a neck brace on, tube down my throat. I had to communicate with a pen and a piece of paper, had no idea what had happened. And my third question that I wrote down was, when can I get back in the race car? And the doctors were like, are you fucking kidding me, man? We just spent 6 hours saving your life. And your third question is, when can I get back in that death wagon?
Yeah.
And it was like, yes, that's just how we're wired. There's really no way, like it's got to get back on the horse, right? I mean, it's just one of those things that you just do.
Can you, if you're comfortable talking about this, it's totally okay if you're not, but like, can you explain like what exactly happened? Because I know you described it as that you got kebabbed. So
shish kebabbed, yeah.
You got shish kebab. So a piece of gear broke off and went through your leg. Is that what happened?
Yeah. So the suspension, one of the pieces of suspension, right? So a 2-foot steel rod, basically. Yeah. You know how like if you hold an egg end to end and you squeeze it, it's really strong?
Right.
Yeah.
So normally when you hit the wall at 200 miles an hour, everything just crumples and crushes and explodes. That's what it's designed to do, to dissipate all the energy, right? I guess I just hit at the weirdest angle where that steel rod, which normally would just fold like a piece of spaghetti, it was that perfect angle where it didn't crush. It fired straight through the car. And so, like, you know how drivers sit in open wheel cars, right?
Yeah,
like your butt's kind of the lowest thing, your feet are a little bit up.
Like a bathtub, right?
Yeah.
Right, exactly. The old bathtub analogy. And so that rod shot through the car and like through my legs, basically. It's like kind of through my, it kind of caught like my ass cheek and then up into my leg, like through one ass cheek and then up into my leg, and kind of popped out around my hip. Somehow it missed all the bone, because like if it had been half an inch higher, it would have just quite literally pulverized my pelvis. There's no way I would have lived. Somehow it missed all the bones and just hit like tissue, but it also hit an artery. And so it hit the femoral artery in my left leg, and so I was bleeding to death in the car. And that was why it was such a sketchy situation. There's a really cool documentary called Yellow, Yellow, Yellow.
Yeah.
If you want to learn more about it and the safety team that saved my life and that travels with IndyCar and set the standard in motorsport safety, I highly recommend watching it.
And did they feel really discouraged when you went back to driving? It's almost like when you catch a fish and you decide to throw it back and then it just bites the hook again. It's like, what the fuck?
30 seconds later, same fish bites the same hook.
Yeah.
Didn't even change the lure. What are you doing?
Yeah.
It's just par for the course, man. They expect it. Like everybody, but there's a couple doctors that were a little confused, but everybody else was like, nah, that's just what you do.
And now I have a technical sort of sportier question. Was it worse for you sporting wise because it was the left leg and you need more power? Like as a driver, you need your right leg less. And if you had to do it over again, you actually would have rather had the right leg get kebab.
No, luckily, by the time I was like all sewed up and healed enough to get back in a car, I had both legs working as they needed. So
but isn't that true? Like you got to be stronger in your left leg than your right leg?
Yeah, for sure. Okay. Yeah, I mean, so the way the brake system works in an open wheel car, like when you first hit the pedal, which, because we 2-foot brake, right? Or we 2-foot pedal, like
right.
Left foot's on the brake, right foot's on the throttle. And when you first hit the pedal, you physically cannot hit it hard enough.
Right.
Like at 180 miles an hour or whatever, like end of the back straight going into a corner, between the downforce and just the inertia of the tire, you cannot put enough force into the brake system to lock the tire. So you hit the pedal as hard as you can with that left foot, and then the whole skill set is releasing and modulating the brake. So as the car slows down, as the downforce comes off, as the inertia of the wheel slows down, you can lock it up. And so it's your threshold braking that whole time and kind of managing how much brake pressure you've got going in the corner.
Right.
So like your leg was able to recover enough that you could like fucking slam it down as hard as you could.
Yep.
That's crazy.
Absolutely.
So you didn't feel any pain going back into the car, slamming?
No, dude, I was so lucky. Like I shouldn't have lived. Honestly, I shouldn't have survived that accident. And the fact that I survived with no like long-term side effects other than some gnarly scars, unbelievable.
So walking around now, you don't feel any residual.
Sometimes if I'm sitting on an airplane for too long, my left leg stiffens up a little bit, but honestly, no.
Did you have a new lease on life after surviving that whole thing? What kind of changed for you mentally after that?
Yeah, it's interesting. So a lot of people ask, like, did it change you, right? Did having that kind of experience change you? And the answer is, professionally, no. I jumped back in the car as soon as I could. I was willing to take the same risks and go for the same gaps and all that stuff. But personally, I mean, huge. Complete different outlook on life, complete different appreciation for things in your life, people in your life. You learn what's actually important and what's not. It sounds so cliche and so like, out of a Tony Robbins book or something, but it's 100% true, man. If you go through something like that, you just have such a chiller outlook on so many things that you realize don't matter.
What was something you don't sweat anymore?
I mean, anything. Like, did I wake up today and can I breathe okay? Cool. Everything else is pretty manageable. You know, like it's just whether it's, you know, like arguments with people or stressing about XYZ. Did I do this? Did I not do that? Did I, you know, just there were so many things that I used to just get so wound up about. Because again, you know, I'm a hyper competitive person. I lived in a hyper competitive environment where every day you woke up and the first thought on your brain was, what can I do today to be better at racing cars? And I didn't lose any of that, but I don't know. You just don't stress the small stuff in everyday life the same way.
Was part of the new lease on life, I got to shake my ass on national television?
Let's put it this way. If I hadn't been through that, there's no fucking way I would have done that show. You learn what's important, what's not important. What's not important. So again, pre-accident, if they had asked me to do that show, I'd be like there's absolutely no conversation we can have that ends in me saying yes. Yeah. And then post-accident, James is like, okay, well, what worries you about doing the show? Oh, well, what if you look stupid on TV trying to dance? And then you're like, yeah, what if?
Right. Yeah.
How does that actually affect? You're like, yeah, you're right. That doesn't actually, like, we're not curing cancer here, guys. We're just dancing on TV. Like, if you get it wrong, who gives a shit? That
said, when you got in there, did the competitive juices start flowing? And were you trying to rip the face off of every other person there?
I was ready to, you know, Tanya Harding, you know,
you were ready to kebab some other people.
Whatever it took, man, whatever it took. It's so funny. I went into that just wanting to not be last. I just didn't want to go home first. That was my only goal. Right. But I actually didn't read the rule book. I didn't actually realize how the show worked. I thought the show was just purely on like the fan votes. Right.
You thought you were doing a popularity contest.
I thought it was a popularity contest. Right. And I was by far I had the least social media following. I was the least known guy. Like, I'm not going to beat Vanilla Ice. Come on. Like, look, Rob? You think I'm going to beat Rob? No chance.
Yeah.
What I found out after the first night was that it's the fan votes plus some algorithm with the scores from the judges. I had no idea those counted. I thought those were like a yardstick for people at home to be like, yeah, that was a good tango or a bad tango, because nobody knows what a tango is supposed to look like, right? No, those scores count. So I was like, oh, hang on a minute. So how hard I work and how I perform now affects how far I go? And my partner was like, yeah, you idiot. And I was like, let's fucking go. Like, when do we start tomorrow? Like, let's get going here. This is serious. And dude, I worked my ass off on that show.
You know, our one of our producers, Brian, he's an avid Dancing with the Stars fan, and we told him we were having you on, and we were like, he was on Dancing with the Stars, and he goes, oh yeah, he was really good. Yeah, he was good.
So what was which was the hardest dance for you to learn?
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, all of them. Like, they're all so hard.
The salsa didn't feel innate
there a specific style?
All the Latin dances I sucked at. I mean, really? 5'10" white guy from Canada. These hips do lie, and they tell no truth. I mean, they don't move in the right way at all.
So you were more of a waltz guy?
Anything in frame. The foxtrot, tango, Viennese waltz, that sort of stuff. I killed a rumba, I'm not gonna lie, which is a Latin dance. Slaughtered it. But it's not like a hippie, you know, it's not like that kind of one. But yeah, I would the stiff things I was good at, the like move stuff. No.
Did you feel worse running up there than you did at some races? Like missing out on the win in some races?
Oh, no, absolutely not.
Oh, really?
I had no business being second place in a dance competition. Like, I sit for a living. This is not something I should have been good at.
So you were like Alpine on the podium. You were just like
thrilled to be there.
Thrilled to be
there.
Okay. Question. You've been on Dancing with the Stars. Which Formula One drivers on the current grid would do the best on Dancing with the Stars?
Someone told me that, like, I think Leclerc has dance background or something, or there's some you know, he's a musician, and he's got an album now, so he's musically inclined, if nothing else. I think either the Ferrari boy, well, the old Ferrari boys, I think Carlos would kill it, and I think Leclerc would be good.
I think Leclerc would kill one of those like really like emotional modern dance ones.
Yeah,
where you have to just be like, and this is what I feel.
He would do like if there was lyrical dance, he would
that
do
would
great.
Kind of be
in a leotard or like a leotard. Yeah,
and obviously like there'd be a ton of pressure like in your home race for Carlos and some of the Latin dances he would have to really nail. He'd obviously do a Dance the Smooth operator.
Yeah.
I mean, that would have to happen.
Yeah.
Goes without saying.
Yeah.
Okay, so those two. Anyone else that you think could who would be? And then I guess
who would be the worst?
Who would be the worst?
I feel like Esteban's too long and lanky. Like he's just that kid is all limbs. He's a very tall racing driver, and he's just very thin. And it's I don't know. He might be good at some lifts, but I feel like technique wise it'd be tough with all that going on.
Right. What about on the IndyCar side of things? Who on the IndyCar grid would do well?
I've always said Newgarden should do it. I think he's got the right kind of personality for it. Yeah. I think he'd be obsessive over being good, but then he would also get into it. Like I've seen Joseph at a wedding after a couple tequila sodas. That guy can dance. That guy can move.
Really?
He can move. Oh yeah.
Wow. We need to see that side more of him.
Dude, wedding Newgarden is my top 3 favorite people on earth.
Interesting. Okay, here's our thought on Newgarden because I feel like he's this guy, like he's this guy. He's won the last 2 Indy 500s. He's like, and he has this all-American, like, nice guy kind of, like, he wants...
He's Homelander.
Yes, but I think that the way that he becomes, like, iconic within the sport is that he needs to turn heel.
Yeah.
I mean, he did the Homelander thing.
I think he's starting to, but I feel like he needs to, like, really lean in and just be, I'm the villain, I'm the big bad bully of IndyCar, and you have to get through me in order to get what you want.
If he was willing to just embrace that role and like play that part, it would be awesome.
Yeah.
The problem is he's a really nice guy, right? So it's like it would all be a facade. But like if he just.
I think Max does it. I think Max is like secretly kind of nice.
And Max is a sweetheart, man. Yeah, like, Max is one of the nicest guys in the paddock.
But it's funny because like on the radio, he's like screaming about the Oscar Piastri penalty, and Oscar's like, he apologized. I'm like, and it's like almost like Max is like, don't tell people I apologize. Like, his outward persona is like mean.
I think a lot of times you'll see drivers have a different on-track personality from an off-track personality. And I think Max is a great example of that. On-track, he's a stone-cold killer. He goes to the line, sometimes past it.
Yeah.
But off-track, he's just a dude that loves going racing, man. He's actually a really nice kid.
Bankers, we are taking a break from this episode to talk to you about our newest sponsor, Chomps. Chomps is the perfect snack. It's my favorite snack to bring with me on race day. With 10 to 12 grams of protein per stick, it's a good source of protein and high quality protein at that. You got to make sure that what you're putting in your body, it's high quality, and with Chomps, it is. Also, 0 grams of sugar and 100% grass-fed and finished beef. That's what you're getting with Chomps. And on top of all that, it tastes good. Here's what I like to do. I like to bring handful of Chomps, throw them in my backpack, go to the race so I can be nice and fueled. Don't get distracted by the booths and the funnel cake and all the stuff that's bad for you. You need a good, healthy snack because it's hot at these races. You want to make sure that you're fueled up and ready to go so that you can watch Lando Norris blow another start. That's listen, but Chomps helps me get through those races. It helps me get through those races with their delicious, delicious sticks. And if you want to learn more, you can go to chomps.com/redflags. The link will be in the description. It's once again, chomps.com/redflags. Learn more and get your chomps today. Now back to the show. Vankas, specifically the male Vankas who listen and watch this pod. When you leave the house, it's phone, wallet, keys, and now, how does my hair look? But if you're experiencing hair loss, you may not be so confident when you step outside the door, and it's time to get that confidence back and restore your hair with Hims. Hims provides you with convenient and quality access to a range of hair loss treatments that work from the comfort of your couch. Hims makes treating hair loss simple with doctor-trusted options and clinically proven ingredients like finasteride and minoxidil that can regrow your hair in as little as 3 to 6 months. Choose from your personalized chewable, oral, spray, and serum treatments to find what works best for you. The process is simple and 100% online. There's no uncomfortable doctor visits. You know, that can be a little bit awkward. You just do it online and you get it done. You can start your free online visit today at hims.com/redflags. That's HIMS.com/redflags for your personalized hair loss treatment options. Once again, that's hims.com/redflags. Results may vary based on studies of topical and oral minoxidil and finasteride. Prescription products require an online consultation with a healthcare provider who will determine if a prescription is appropriate. Restrictions apply. See website for full details and important safety information. All right, let's talk about this season of F1. Let's talk about maybe a little bit about 2025. I mean, what were your what were your biggest takeaways? I mean, I'm curious your thoughts on, the Lando Max of it all of this year, that, Lando had a shot. Seemed like there were times where he fumbled the ball. Seems like there were a few times where McLaren's strategy kind of fumbled it. In terms of his mentality going into next year with the battle with Piastri, I guess I'm a Lando guy. I kind of picked Lando coming in as being an F1 fan, and I'm like, does he have what it takes to win the championship? Is 2020, was this the year, or can it happen next year? Like, I'm curious as a racing driver, what your thoughts are on that whole situation.
Yeah, look, it was never this year. It was never, ever, ever this year. We bigged it up because it was a cool story. And Max won with like 7 races to go last year. So we were trying to make it a thing. It was never a thing. And that's not on Lando. It's not all on Lando. Lando wasn't ready, but also like Lando won 4 races. Max won 9. Like there's in no world should Max have lost the championship to Lando, right? So I think that's what people kind of forget is like the start of the season is so far away by the time you get to the last quarter. You forget that like Max won 5 of the first 6 races, like walking away. And everybody then got better. So when Lando started being good, so did Charles, so did Carlos, so did George, so did Lou. Like everybody was trading when Max just got to dominate early on, right? I think Lando learned a lot of good lessons. And I think he is now ready to genuinely fight for it next year. I think the team's ready, and I think Lando's ready.
What do you think they learned? Because Lando's like, I know what it takes now. Like, what do you like? It's not like there's anything. Is there something concrete that you can learn?
It's honestly, it's self-belief, and if you look at how Lando would talk about Lando in the first half of the year versus how Lando would talk about Lando in the back half of the year, there's a very noticeable difference. Every athlete's very hard on themselves. Lando was publicly like so hard on himself. And in the second half of the year, you didn't hear that. Even when it wasn't a great day, he wasn't just like shitting on himself anymore. And, when Oscar gets taken out in turn 1 and Leclerc goes from 19th to 8th in the first lap, and all of a sudden the constructors battle it's the race is on. Lando cannot make a single mistake. If he loses 1 place to Carlos, they lose the championship.
Yeah, it's a fine line though. It's such a tricky thing between self-belief and like self-delusion or like arrogance. Like, Checo has all these quotes where it's like, well, maybe I take some responsibility, but it's a big team. It's not only me. It's like,
yeah.
There's also like, well, if you're not hard enough on yourself, then what the fuck do you like? Then you don't learn anything. So there's also that.
It is absolutely a fine line. And I've got to say that I guess it's probably because I've been through, every situation in the book in 11 years of driving IndyCar. But like, I can tell when a driver's quotes are what the driver actually believes when he goes to bed at night and when it's just this shit he has to say in the media.
Right.
And some of like the Checo stuff was more the latter. Right. Whereas, the Lando stuff, I think it's pretty genuine. I think he has that confidence now. Like he's won races. He's not the amount of people that were asking him about losing the lead when he was starting from pole. Like, oh my God, that stuff is so annoying when you're a driver. Like it's so frustrating. And of course he knew. Like you don't have to bring it up again. Of course he knows. Oh, have you done anything to work on that since the last? Oh no, I just laid him back. I was like, no, I'm fine. I'll just figure. I'll let them not get as good a start. We're like, whatever. I don't need to try any harder. Like,
do you think do you think there is something wrong with that car and with the clutch or something, or do you think that's like a driver skill?
I think it's both. I mean, the car plays a big part in it, but I think the car's as even as the rest. I don't know look, Max isn't exceptionally good at starts. I don't know if that's Max or the Red Bull. I don't know the answer to that.
Okay.
It's probably a combination of both, but Lando has now led several times out of turn 1 from pole. So like, he's fine.
Right.
Max wasn't in P2 though.
That's touche.
Yeah.
Touche.
Max was in P4, and then all of a sudden, and then Oscar Piastri found out.
But is that anti Lando, or is that pro? Like, if someone else was first, but Max was second, and Max passed him, we wouldn't be having this conversation. But Lando was the only guy that could beat him on Saturday, so it was always Lando, right?
Right.
It's the narrative, yeah.
Maybe Lando's great at starts. Maybe Lando's the second best driver at starts,
right.
and Max
actually,
is the best. Yeah. No, but Oscar has gotten him a couple of times, but maybe he didn't expect
Oscar
that
passed him. He didn't just get him off the line. Like Oscar's first lap move in Monza was unbelievable.
Oh my God, yeah,
thing was dirty.
Yeah.
There was such great racing this year. Is there one kind of race that sticks out to you in terms of? I mean, it's so rare in the F1 world that you get so many dynamic races. What was your favorite race to watch, commentate on this year?
My favorite one that I watched was still, it's maybe a bit of a tie because the one ended poorly, but like Austria before they hit was awesome. Yeah. That was just classic motor racing. That was so much fun to watch. I wish so badly that they hadn't hit and they could have just dueled it out. I don't care who won. Right. It was just such a good battle. And then Silverstone, the way the ebb and flow, like the Red Bull was quick, and the McLaren was quick, and the Mercedes was quick, and then everybody kind of the changing conditions, just they favored somebody at a different time, and so that was awesome to watch.
And where was there a race where you commentated where you're like, wow, I'm earning my money today. This race,
dude, it
sucks.
Yeah, that happens. It happens a lot. I mean, I don't remember Mexico being super exciting. Like once, Max got him off the line. Hey, Max got Carlos off the line.
Yeah.
Then Carlos just passed him back 5 laps later, whatever it was, and then that was kind of it. Like nothing really changed, And
are you getting nervous or like, what are we gonna talk about, guys? Like,
dude, this is the biggest difference between like commentating on F1 TV versus on network TV for IndyCar. Commercial breaks.
Right.
When you have a dog shit race happening, and those 2.5 minutes where you can just go like, guys, what? Okay, we need to come up with a plan here. What are we going to do? Let's go through the stat pack. Who went on vacation? Let's get some pictures of that from Instagram. All right, and we're back. Okay, and back to the those breaks are so helpful in that scenario because you can strategize what we're going to do next.
Yeah,
right. Yeah, no, it's true. Even with like the pre-show stuff, and even in quali. Because we watch it on the F1. What is this thing called? The
F1 TV app.
F1 multi-viewer for F1.
Multi-viewer, yeah.
I can toggle back and forth between the international feed and the F1 TV feed, and in the international feed there'll just be like times where it's commercial break. In between sessions, and then there'll be video, but no one's commentating. And so if I'm watching the international feed, I'll pop over, because the F1 TV feed just never stops.
Yeah, you guys got to be talking over like a close up of Leclerc watching the TV,
which is also why you should just be on the F1 TV feed the whole time. But that's neither here nor there.
Well, I gotta give you props because I'd been only watching it really on like ESPN. And I had been watching only like the main broadcast, and I was hesitant to give you guys my time and energy. And then after a while, I was like, I think I'm gonna go over to F1 TV. I think I like what's happening over here. You guys have done such a great job, and I feel like especially this year for you specific. I think the whole team, but then also I feel like for you specifically, there's been a big groundswell of people loving what you've had to offer the broadcast.
Yeah, appreciate it, man. Thank you so much. Yeah. Appreciate that. No, it's a great group.
I also live for Brundle, and I think they made a big mistake. They made a big mistake letting him take races off, because then I was like, he's not there. What do they got going on? Oh, this is pretty good.
Yeah,
they made a big mistake letting him take races off.
And we have little Brundle.
You have Alex Brundle.
Right.
We've got his son.
Sounds just like him.
If you close your eyes, you cannot tell that. It's insane.
Yeah.
And he's so good. The analysis that he gives is so spot on, and he delivers it so smooth, and he's got all the big words. Like he's he's so good at it. So we've got your Brundle, man. Which is just a different one. It's a different brand.
You got your Brundle.
They got everything covered. Also, you got to lock down Nico Rosberg permanently, because whenever he shows up, he's an agent of chaos.
And he does love stirring the old pot.
It's so fun. He doesn't care. He gives that little wow factor that I really appreciate a lot.
He did say recently on a pod, he was talking about how he was like, if I'm Lando Norris right now, I'm watching every battle that Max Verstappen has had over the last 3+ years.
I want to get into rules of engagement. Like, what do you think of the rules of engagement currently as someone who raced in IndyCar? Because I'll watch an IndyCar race. I remember there was one IndyCar race where Pato O'Ward mugged 3 people. He took.
Oh yeah, when we were there.
Yeah.
Wasn't it at Long Beach?
It was Long Beach. Yeah, it was Long Beach. He like took out Dixon.
Oh yeah.
And I think it was you guys. It was like you guys. Like Lee Difford was like, yeah, okay. It was a slightly aggressive move by Pato. Whereas like if that was done in F1, like Pato would be in The Hague, like locked up forever. And it was just like a casual move. Is it because the cars are more durable and nobody like what do you think F1 could learn in terms of rules of engagement? It's kind of interesting that, IndyCar has, they govern it themselves. There's no FIA.
Yeah.
What do you think there is to learn in terms of rules of engagement?
Well, I mean, I think the fact that the drivers have asked for a change tells you that there's something inherently wrong. But it's like anything, man. The current rules were written with a lot of input from the drivers. And then as in any competitive situation, drivers one by one slowly learn how to push the boundary of the rules, exploit the loopholes, and then you expose new problems that need to be fixed. So, credit Max for pushing them beyond the boundaries of reasonable and exposing some of the flaws in how they're written. And I think next year we're going to see a different set of guidelines. IndyCar, we've spent a lot of time, again, with the drivers trying to design a set of rules that are fair, but also as black and white as possible. And that's one of the things that came up a lot in the last just like few weeks with the FIA. Some of the penalties they were dishing out. Look, if you could try to justify why that penalty was maybe necessary or fair, but there was no precedent for it. And it was inconsistent on how the same offense had been treated recently. So that's a big thing that people care about. It's just consistency.
Right. If you establish a strike zone, that's the strike zone. That's
100%.
That seems to be what's really missing from the current situation that's happening over there. Yeah. I want to get into a little bit 2025. This next year coming up, there's some interesting teammate battles. I think it's a little bit. I'm curious if you have an opinion on like which car you think might have the advantage. Whether you think that they'll be kind of like swapping like they did a little bit for the last half of this year, but also the Lewis Charles situation with what you think's maybe going to happen also with like the Lando Piastri situation. And maybe some of these rookies coming in. What are your kind of hopes and or predictions?
Yeah, what's getting you excited?
Well, I think what's getting me excited is that I think we're going to see a year similar to the back half of this year, which is incredible. Because I mean, you mentioned it earlier, you don't get that a lot in F1.
Yeah,
right. And in 2026, it's all going out the window, and it's going to be a terrible season. Yeah. So it's going to objectively just be awful. And so let's enjoy 2025 as best we can. I think it's going to be very similar to this year in that a team will come out strong. I don't think as strong as Red Bull came out, and I don't think it'll last as long. And I think we'll very quickly go back to, all right, if it's a lot of straightaways and cool conditions, Mercedes is going to be quick. And if it's a lot of slow speed corners and low downforce, then Ferrari is going to be quick. And if it's just straight high down, I think every car is going to have its characteristics that track characteristics that suit the car. And I think it's going to be a volley back and forth between at least those four teams.
And since they all have like strong team combos, do you think that's going to favor Max because he's kind of like a one-man team?
It favors him from a driver standpoint, but obviously it handcuffs them from constructors for sure.
Right.
But it seems like they don't really care about that.
Well, look, I mean, you look back to 2007, right? And you had Fernando and Hamilton at McLaren just hammering each other, and then Kimi sneaks in and wins it by a point. You go back to the Schumacher era. It was only ever one driver.
Yeah.
Even like, I think Mark Webber got the short end of the stick a couple times at Red Bull, but like Seb was their guy and Seb won everything, right? Like it was that's the problem with having two good teams. Think back to two good drivers in a team, Senna and Prost. Right. It was terrible when they were teammates, right? Team won everything, but they luckily no car was even close. So they still wrapped up everything. But if you're just taking points off each other, it's really, really tough. So
what do you think's this Ferrari situation going on? I mean, I'm curious your thoughts on Lewis's struggles with qualifying this year. George having the edge on him. Seems to me he's going to a different, another team with a great another Mr. Saturday. In Charles, I guess as Lewis. My impression as the fan is like maybe the first thing to go with age is that the Saturday. Because Sunday, he doesn't seem to have a problem. He can start out of position and make his way back up to a podium like we saw in Abu Dhabi, where, he didn't make the podium, but, get the sense of it. It's that Saturday speed. Is he always going to be starting on the back? Like if Ferrari really does have a chance to win the drivers' championship or the constructors, like is Lewis always going to be starting on the back foot because Charles has the youth and the Saturday speed?
That's a very good question, and I think you've done a pretty good analysis of it because I agree. I think the first thing to go is going to be the Saturday speed. I'm not sure if that's what we saw this year, as much as he knew he was leaving from before we got to the first race, and I know that he consciously showed up to the track every weekend and tried to do his best, but like subconsciously, that's coming to an end,
right?
Because like last year, 2023, he buried George, right? Like he was significant. He had him covered.
Yeah.
So I don't think he forgot how to drive in the course of a year. There's a lot that was going on in the background this year. And to say that has no effect on a driver's performance, I think is probably a little bit short-sighted. So I think he's going to be invigorated with this new opportunity. But Charles is known as being a Saturday guy as long as the car's good. Because even Carlos would have qualified him regularly if the balance was just a bit off. So Charles needs the car in a very specific window, and then he can do things that no one can do with it.
Right.
But it'll be interesting to see where the setup lands when you've got like the incumbent who is the Ferrari boy, and then you've got the new guy coming in that's the 7-time world champion, that's Fred's boy. So it's going to be an interesting dynamic.
When you talk about like team preference, is it impossible to give each driver equal treatment? Because you have Leclerc, who you say is Mr. Ferrari, golden boy, speaks Italian, cries when they don't win the constructors. But then you got Lewis Hamilton, who they're giving $700 million to. Like, is it possible for them to be treated equally?
No, not, I mean, not to 100%. Okay. I believe that they will try their absolute hardest to do that. But again, that's not the best way to win a driver's championship.
Right.
We just talked about that.
Right. Yeah.
But there's always going to be a guy that gets to leave pit lane first or second, depending on where you want to be in qualifying. There's always going to be the guy that has to pit first. Like, you can never make it 100% exactly the same. Are they going to go as far as not bringing an upgrade to the track if they can only produce one in time? No, of course not. If there's a piece that will make a car faster, it will be at the racetrack. Who gets it?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. The cars won't be even that weekend.
Who gets it?
I don't know.
God damn it.
And then I guess it's interesting because they might start out, I guess, like in your mind, like, yeah, it's all going to be equal. It's all going to be equal. And then this is kind of a little bit what happened with the McLaren thing this year. Was it like Lando was ahead, but like Oscar was still technically in it? So there was just like, when is the time when you really put all of your eggs in the one basket? And then will Lewis's contract, Charles's contract even allow them to do that? Do they have their own Mark Webber standing there with, full kangaroo ready to fight, being like, no, my boy is number one driver, and will it be too little too late? If you had to put money right now on who is winning the drivers' championship next year, who are you betting on?
I don't know how you bet against Max.
That's right.
He still just operates at a level that's so much higher than everybody else. Even with Lando, I think is ready as long as the car is competitive every weekend. What's so impressive about Max is even when the car's not the best, he's pulling home a third, a fourth, when other guys are 7th, 8th.
Right.
And talk about self-belief. I mean, Brazil, that was like, we talked about this on our pod. Like, that was like Michael Jordan, I Believe I Can Fly, Space Jam from
the most clutch performance. I mean, you're probably going to see in our lifetime. Like, it was unbelievable.
Yeah.
It's going to go down with Senna at Donington, and, it's going to go down with Hamilton at Silverstone. And like, it's going to go down with some of the best wet weather drives that have ever happened in a Formula One car.
Yeah. It's like so hard to relate to something like that. It's like when Lewis goes, retire the car. I'm like, yeah, totally. I totally relate.
I get that. I don't want you to be out there. You don't want to be out there. Let's just call this thing. All right.
Have you ever, what was the closest you ever came to retiring? Have you ever said that?
No. It's so against, like, I've thought it in my head. I would never say it out loud.
Especially in IndyCar.
Not even just in my own helmet without the microphone keyed up. Just, I wouldn't even utter the words. But I thought, like, the ones where it sucks in IndyCar is when you've had an incident on an oval, and like, let's say you've had a bit of contact and the car's like a little bit off. When you're on an oval and the car's a little bit off, it's terrifying, man. Right. And you're just falling laps down. You're just in the way, and you're just trying to struggle bust through it. It's like, oh, only 163 more laps, huh? So, like, it's like a first lap that's not hard enough, like an accident that's not hard enough to take you out, but it's enough to damage the car, is the worst thing in an Indy car.
Yeah. I remember, I think when we were at the 500, there was like vibrations, I think in Dixon's car. It was like, there's vibrations in the car, and I was kind of like, my stupid brain was like, and
yeah.
And then I was like, oh, you're so fucked.
Dude, at 230, it's a bitch. It really sucks.
I think it was like Ray Hall that, like, he had trouble. I think he had trouble.
There was off the line. There was
someone stalled. It was either Ray Hall or Marco Andretti, or one of these guys had trouble, and then he had to start late, and he was like 4 laps down.
Oh, that was Graham 2 years ago, I think.
Yeah. And I was like, and it was like, oh, thank God you could start. And it's like, well, you're already 3 laps down.
Right.
And I'm like, that's miserable.
It's the worst.
But, okay. Yeah. So that's you're picking Max right now. What about IndyCar? You think Pelot's going for his 4th?
I don't know why you'd bet against him. I mean, again, it's a bit of a harder one just because, it's so tough in IndyCar, but you look at how he's won 2 of his 3 championships. Like, man, that guy, again, is just so impressive. The team is absolutely firing on all cylinders. So I think it's tough to bet against him, to be honest.
Okay, so you did 8 races this year. It felt like more. Gotta say, I felt like you were.
Hey,
you felt like
no. I just felt like
it was only 8. God, I felt like you were around all year.
You just felt like you felt
omnipresent.
Yeah, you felt baked into the cake. Yeah. Okay, but we got some questions about your fellow F1 TV team members here.
All right, hit me.
All right, okay. Who has the best style?
Ooh, good question. I mean, Lawrence Barretto does shoes better than anybody for sure. Mm-hmm. For sure. But I mean, Laura Winter's she's always sharp. She's always, she's always looking good.
Yeah.
Will Buxton is,
rolling in
kicking himself somewhere.
He's hit and miss. We always joke that his favorite color is oatmeal. It's just as long as there's some derivative of beige.
He does love a beige.
He does
really love a beige. Okay.
Yeah.
Who would bail you out of jail?
Oh yeah, Buxton in a second.
Yeah.
Buxton.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Who is calling you to bail them out of jail?
Probably also. Well, yeah, probably Buxton.
Okay. Who would be the best at planning a bachelor or bachelorette party?
Ooh. Well, we do have a strategist on the team, so maybe Ruth Buscombe for that one.
Yeah. I was going to say.
She knows how to party and she knows how to plan.
Yeah.
Who would be the best on Dancing with the Stars?
Probably also Laura.
Okay. Who's
Laura.
most likely to miss their flight?
Buxton.
Who is most likely to go missing in Vegas?
Ruth.
Who would be the best racing driver of the, obviously excluding the...
I was like, excluding Brundle and DC, right? And Palmer?
Yeah.
The non-drivers of the group.
So I know that Laura's done a day in a Formula 4 car that she was quite proud about. But Will actually did like a school
winter class. He did the winter class.
Yeah. I'm not surprised he told you about it. And he beat Nicholas Latifi or something, right? Like that's his claim to fame. Yeah. So let's go with him.
Okay.
One of Canada's best.
That's right. Let's see.
What's the best piece of broadcasting advice you've gotten from Will or anybody else that you worked with?
Man. So this is I don't know
bracelets
if it really
from Will.
Yeah,
more bracelets. More bracelets.
Oh man, yeah, he wears a lot of bracelets. That's true. Good style choice.
Yeah.
The honestly the most interesting piece of advice that I got was when I started at NBC, because look, when you're a driver, you feature in the broadcast if you do well, right? And they might interview you. And people are your fans, people are your haters. Like, you kind of get a little bit of everything, right? But when you're in the broadcast, the entire race is you, right? Everything you say, it's not a 30-second interview that people are going to, rip apart. It's going to be 2 hours of you talking. So you're giving them so much more to have an opinion on, good, bad, or indifferent. And so we were kind of having this conversation about what it's like and, what you're getting, like what to expect and stuff like that. And Lee Diffie told me, he goes, just remember, there's a lot of people watching, but we have an audience of one. I was like, what do you mean? And he goes, as long as your boss thinks you're doing a good job, doesn't matter what the Twitterati say. I was like, interesting. And so like you got really good at just ignoring all the messages. And again, good, bad, or indifferent. You can't just read the good comments and think you're doing great. You can't just read the bad comments and think that you suck. They're irrelevant. The feedback from your boss and from your team and the people around you that are making the show, that's all that actually matters. And that was a really good piece of advice.
So, but how are you not just like, wow, Penske's looking great today? They are just such a well-run machine. I mean, if you're just, if that's the metric.
When I got hired by NBC.
Oh, NBC is different. Yeah.
Yeah, because that's the thing. Like it's not the TV broadcast is the one thing Penske doesn't own in IndyCar.
Yes,
they own every fair.
Yeah.
So before I got the job, the big boss man was like, I just need to know, are you going to be okay calling out your friends? I was like, yes, boss. I'll call it how I see it. And so that's the thing, man. Like I've had to, there are guys that race IndyCar that stood at my wedding, and if they screw up, I got to be like, that was dumb. Mm-hmm. Shouldn't have done that.
Have you ever gotten some like WTF texts or?
No one's actually called me out. I think some guys have been a little annoyed, but like they just get over it before confronting me. But again, I would like to think I do a pretty fair job of it because, look, drivers are never wrong, right? But when I was racing, I always used to try to be pretty self-aware of like, if I screwed something up bad, just be like, that one's on me. Sorry. And some guys don't like doing that. But I feel like, again, when you go to bed at night, even regardless of what you said in your interview, when you go to bed at night, you know if you screwed it up or not. And so I like to think that the calls I make are, when they might be mad at the moment when they hear it on TV because they didn't want the world to know that they screwed up. But when they go to bed at night, they know that they did.
Really? So when a driver says they just turn into me when they clearly messed up, you think they know that they screwed up?
Half the time, for sure. Like in F1, it's so outrageous. Like in F1, because all the radios are monitored so closely, they you can almost hear. I wish that you could hear the next message, because I feel like there's so many times when a driver, I won't name names, gets on the radio and it's like, XYZ did this to me and blah, 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 blah. And he's like just pinging off the rev limiter, so angry. And then 8 seconds later, he goes, hey, sorry, are we strat A or strat B? Like, what do you think we're going to do? Like, it's a show. It's a total act. They're playing it up for the FIA, and it's just to try to get a penalty for the other guy.
Right.
It's like taking a dive in soccer, right? Yeah. You're trying to force the penalty by he turned in on me. I was definitely alongside him at the apex. It's like, bro, any camera angle, on board, off track, any camera angle will tell you were nowhere close to even with him at the apex. Like, why are you even saying? It's like you don't think we have cameras on you.
Yeah.
What did you think George Russell and Max Verstappen went to bed thinking in the midst of their little spat?
I don't think Max thought much. I think he said his piece and went to bed and said, I'm a 4-time world champion. I don't care what you say.
Yeah.
I think he was in George's head a little bit more than the other way around.
Yeah.
You got fan questions?
So we got some fan questions here. This is from Danny Fox. What do you think about British bias? What are your thoughts on this? It's a big topic of discussion. There's a lot of talk around it. What has your experience been around that?
Okay. This. I'm actually glad you asked that. This is a very easy one to answer. So if you are in North America, if you are in Canada or the US, and you are watching F1 on TV, right? On ESPN in the States, on TSN in Canada, you are watching the Sky UK broadcast. Okay. The people at Sky are hired by a UK company to make a show for a UK audience. Of course, guess what? The Dutch broadcast is Max bias. The French broadcast is Grosjean bias. Like, of course it's British bias. It is made for Britain. people forget that it's not made for the U.S. We're stealing someone else's broadcast. If you want a non-biased broadcast, watch F1 TV. And I'm not just saying that because I work
here. Holy shit.
Dude. That was the point of F1 TV. That's why they bring on a North American. That's why they bring Davide Valsecchi on. That's why they bring people from other places, because it's very conscientiously trying to not be that. And so I can honestly say, sat next to Alex Jakes and Jolien Palmer or David Coulthard or whoever, whether it's Buxton, it doesn't matter.
Just named a bunch of guys from the UK.
But what I'm saying is they are not biased to the British drivers. I've never seen something like a call and be like, really, is that how you see that? They call it how they see it, and they treat everybody the same. So download F1 TV, pay your $80 a year. It's worth it, and it's not. If you don't like British bias, we don't have it. We don't have it.
Just Canadian bias.
Just a little bit of Canadian bias.
Just a little bit of Canadian bias.
But it's like super like nice and apologetic when it's wrong. Like it's very on brand.
Sorry.
What's the craziest rumor that you've heard about yourself? This is from Grace Robinson.
That's a good one. Well, I don't know if it's a rumor, but I had this guy come up to me at a party once and claimed that he had Googled me. It was back home. It was a guy that I technically went to high school with, though I don't actually remember him going to my high school. And he came up to me hammered at a party one day and he goes, "Oh, I Googled." He's like, "Oh, you're doing pretty well, huh?" I'm like, "Yeah, I guess." And he goes, "Oh, I Googled you." I'm like, "Okay." He goes, "You make $36 million a year." And I was like, "Okay." I got to tell you, man, you can't believe everything you read on the internet.
Yeah.
That was the wildest one.
I'd like to believe that.
Oh my God. I would give $35 million for that to be true.
Do you have a most awkward or memorable moment from your time on F1 TV?
Oh, from my time on F1 TV. I mean, sometimes when you're interviewing drivers, you get caught out with answers if they're like in a bad mood. And it's so tough because I've been on the other side of it and I know how annoying it is when people are asking dumb questions that you've already answered 100 times and you're pissed off from whatever happened in the session. So like I've had one or two of those moments where you could just tell like they're like, shut up and get out of my face. And I was like, yeah, fair. I don't want to be here any more than you want me to be here. So sometimes that's tough. And it's yeah, but it's part of the job, right? Like I've accepted that that's now something you've got to do from time to time.
Right. How did Dancing with the Dallas Cowboys cheerleaders, rank on your list?
It was up there. It was up there on the awkwardness. I'm sure you saw the clip. It wasn't pretty. I gotta say, whoever from F1 edited that, they were very kind to me because I feel like that was like 4 different takes at it, and they found the best like section and cut it together of each part and like cut it all together to make it look like one. That was tough. That was a tough look.
I have a fan question.
Yeah.
If F1 had to race on one IndyCar track, what would it be?
Road America.
Okay.
That would be me. I would love to see F1 race at Road America.
How come?
It's kind of like, this is like a terrible thing to say in a lot of ways because it seems like it's doing it injustice to the other track, but it's kind of, we call it North America's Spa, right? It's 4 miles long. It's through the woods. It's elevation. It's slow corners. It's fast corners. It's just like an old school proper racetrack. And I mean, if you just made this like extended some runoffs and stuff like that, you could actually race an F1 car there. But yeah, that would be sick.
What about the other way around? What F1 track would you love to see IndyCar race at?
I mean, there's tons.
Yeah.
I mean, if you want to keep it simple, proximity, Montreal, Mexico City. If you want to talk like absolute all-time list, Suzuka and Spa.
Yeah. Do you have a like all-time favorite F1 track?
It'd be that I've never driven, Suzuka or Spa. Suzuka and Spa are on my bucket list to go, to drive on, to just be in the vicinity of, because those places are just magical, man.
How much time do you spend in the sim to prepare for like a race, F1 race?
For an F1 race?
Yeah.
Me personally?
Yeah, like or even the video game, just to get used to like the turns and the.
I've watched it for so long. I know them for the most part. Like,
I see.
Okay.
Like I like Singapore, I had to brush up on what the corner numbers were because F1 loves throwing. Well, a lot of tracks love throwing in like numbers for corners that aren't really corners, so they can say it's a 20-turn track and it's really like a 14-turn track.
Right.
Yeah.
So I had to like make sure I knew some of the corner numbers, but for the most part, I know most of the tracks just from either having driven on some of them or just from watching for so long.
So you've memorized every corner pretty much, like just through osmosis.
The other thing is on F1 weekends, I often get to do like a hot lap segment. So I'll put someone in the front seat and get to go pound around in an Aston Martin or a Mercedes or a McLaren or something and get to learn the track, which is always good fun, and try to make whoever's sitting next to me puke.
That's so fun.
Who was the most fun person you did a hot lap with?
It's kind of a tie between Laura Winter and Ruth Buscombe because both of them were so ill by the end of it. Like Laura was flat on her back for like a half hour afterwards.
Wow.
And Ruth never actually confirmed or denied if she had to run to the bathroom and throw up after we got out of the car, but she didn't look like she was feeling awesome.
I could see Ruth being like, I'm fine.
Yeah, exactly. And then just walks off very quickly and disappears. We're like, where'd she go?
Amazing.
This was such a pleasure, man. We appreciate you coming on.
No, I appreciate you having me. What races are on your guys' cards for next year? Both Indy and F1.
Definitely
all the American
ones. We went down to, well, this wouldn't be next year, would it? The new race that's going to be in Arlington.
Indy. Yeah, it's 26.
Yeah. We were down there for the announcement, so hopefully we'll be there for 26. We're not sure exactly.
Maybe Silverstone, maybe Toronto, or
okay.
Montreal. Not.
Oh, you should come to Toronto for the IndyCar race.
Yeah.
Toronto's an awesome city.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think at one point we were also maybe thinking about trying to go down to Nashville for the end of for the last race in Indy, but then I know because they were going to do it down the street, and then they wound up going to the other track. So we're still figuring that out, but certainly guaranteed all the American ones will be at next year.
All right.
What about you? Are you doing 8 again, or are they bumping you up?
We're still working on it. So
they better bump him up.
But
bump
you tell him
F1 TV.
You tell Tony.
That's right.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, obviously with the IndyCar calendar, there's a lot of clashes, right? So there's only so many openings.
Sure.
And then doing a couple IMSA races myself behind the wheel. So it's a busy year. But man, we'll squeeze in as many as we can because it's fun.
How much shit do you get? Like, people think you're going Hollywood in IndyCar?
So my podcast with Alex Rossi, who again, former Formula One driver, I would like to just throw that out there.
Jenny, cut that out. That's fine.
When I started doing these, like, oh, big F1 guy now, huh? Just too good for us. Big F1 guy. It's like, you literally raced it, bro. Like, I will never be as big an F1 guy as you were. But it's been good, man. I mean, the fact of the matter is like, obviously the most of the racing community in IndyCar watch F1 anyway, because we're all just race fans. But then it's great to just see, especially from the app side of things, how many people are watching and, make comments, walking down the street like, hey, man, love you on F1 TV. It's been really cool to see how many people are paying attention and watching because if the sport grows, I think it's good for all motorsports, to be honest.
Hell yeah.
Well, as you pointed out, we're going to be in court with Gunter Steiner one day about our intro,
yes.
But can you honor us with a goodbye, Vankas?
Oh, man. Goodbye, Vankas.
Oh, that was great. Goodbye, Vankas.
Goodbye, Vankas.